If you have a Bible, open it up to the book of Luke. It's the third gospel in the New Testament. If you don't have a Bible, there's Bibles in the chairs in front of you. It's a slightly different version I'll read, but just know mine's more accurate. We've been in a study in the book of Luke since December. We will finish next April. I feel like we're moving very quickly. The rest of you may not, and it just doesn't matter. I greatly appreciated David Eckman spelling me for a couple weeks. I'll be up here, I think 6 out of the next 7 weeks. So we'll thin the crowd out a little bit during that time, and then we'll have some other folks come in and spell me again and raise the crowd back up. How's that sound? In this section of Luke, in chapter 12, in verse 1, it says, there were so many people crowding around Jesus, they were actually stepping on one another. And it's in the midst of that moment with the crowd, or as is titled in a book Jeff Clitmus just had me read, Not a Fan, where this pastor identifies the difference between a fan and a follower. You have really the crowds, and I'll point to all of you, and say, you're kind of the fans, if you will. And then, in the midst of these people, there's so many, and they're stepping on each other. Jesus then draws his attention to just his disciples. And he looks at a small group of people, and there's a crowd all around, but they're no longer who he is talking to. They may be able to hear, they may not, but they're not the focus of what he is speaking to and what's on his mind. And he looks at this small group of people, and he begins to teach. In the passage David Eckman spoke on last week, he began to speak to the disciples. This is the remainder of his life, the last 9 months of his life. He has now set his face towards Jerusalem. He is walking to his death. And in this chapter 9 to chapter 19, we literally have the last 9 months of his life, perhaps the last month of his life from here forward. Although Luke is not in order, it's the order that Luke would place it in. But it's all in that particular time frame. And Jesus looks at them first, and he says, I need to teach you how to have faith in the face of opposition. And from that, Jesus then moves to this section this morning, where while speaking to this tight group of people around him, these men and women who are truly followers, they're not just fans, a man interrupts him with a personal issue. And Jesus utilizes that interruption to speak to a greater issue, which is now not only to have faith in the face of opposition, but to also have faith in determining where life flows from, and how you handle your possessions and greed and such things like that. How you handle the anxiety over your future. Jesus had a very, very basic assumption about life. And this is it. Ultimately, everything is God's. In Psalm 24, verse 1, it says this, the earth is the Lord's, and all it contains, the world, and this is the part we forget about, and those who dwell in it. To think like Jesus thinks, to think out of the ancient Hebrew text of the Old Testament, like Jesus thought, we are simply supposed to view our life as if we are stewards. We are literally supposed to view our life as people who are simply managers of whatever God has placed in our hands. Which means we own nothing. How's that for a really, really feel-good story this morning? My cars are on loan. It doesn't matter whether they're paid off or not. My kids are on loan. My house is on loan. This church is on loan. My whole life is on loan. My soul, it says, is on loan. It's funny, my business partner and I own radiation cancer centers. We have one up in the Santa Rosa Runner Park area. And I used to go up there twice a week. I hardly get up there at all now. I'm probably up there every 3 months because Jeremy Mann, many of you know, manages that center. And he's, quite frankly, fired so many people out there, rehired so many people. I don't know half the people in the center. I hired every person in our company at one point, 50, 60 people. I go up there, and so every time I go up, I'm introducing somebody, because Jeremy's yet fired another employee. You may need to speak to him afterwards about this. And I meet this gal, I go in the kitchen after our meeting, and I shake her hand, and there's 2 other people with me after this big meeting we had, and she's teasing me because my hands were kind of cold. And she said, yeah, I would rate the other 2 handshakes far better than yours. She's teasing me, which I thought was fantastic. I do some things, later on I'm out in the front, and she's walking up to me, and she's a nurse, and she walks up, and she's very sheepish. She's very uncomfortable. And she's with a nurse that's been with us for almost 10 years. And the nurse of 10 years said, I wanted to introduce you to somebody. I said, oh no, I already met her. And she had her head down. She goes, oh yeah, we met already. I feel so bad. I said, what do you feel bad about? She said, well, I didn't know you're the owner. Which is so funny. Your reaction is always my reaction. It's the last thing on my mind. I never, ever, ever think that. And I looked at her, I said, oh dear, you're missing the whole point. I owe nothing. I'm simply managing what is God's. And she didn't know what to do with that. She felt so stupid because she felt like she disrespected me, which was kind of funny too. So, didn't make somebody uncomfortable and teaching all at the same point. This is really my life goal. This story is ultimately about a guy who is fighting for what he considers to be his rights. And his basic assumption is this: what I want will ultimately provide life for me. What is owed to me will ultimately provide the life that I'm looking for. The story is really about a man who either forgot or failed to recognize that everything is God's. And ultimately the life that he is seeking will be found in none of those things. So let's turn to the passage and see how this unfolds before Jesus. As he speaks to his disciples, in verse 13 we read this. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who appointed me judge or arbitrator over you? A couple things to notice very quickly in these verses. First of all, he approaches him and calls him teacher. And if you've been around for this study since December, you realize this term teacher is a very respectful term. He's approaching him as a rabbi. But in the book of Luke, whenever anybody calls Jesus rabbi or teacher, they don't get him. They think he's simply yet another Torah expert. Yet when they call him Kyrios, when they address him as Lord in Luke, you know they're grasping something unique about this man that stands in front of them. And it's a real giveaway that he, quite frankly, doesn't know who he's talking to. The second thing to notice is, he doesn't say, notice, my brother and I are fighting over the family inheritance. Would you come and help mediate that and help us reconcile this issue? What does he say instead to Jesus?
I'm right.
I'm right. He's wrong. My brother's wrong. Fix it. Wow. How's that for gripping? This is a guy who is choking the life out of life. Tell him I'm right, tell him he's wrong, and tell him to give me what is due me. So what does the demand already tell you about the relationship? What does the demand tell you about his relationship with his brother?
It's not healthy.
What's that?
It's not healthy.
It's not healthy. They've already had a split. Any Jewish person in this audience listening would have a series of assumptions right out of the bat. Number one, the father has died. Number two, the father has died and given no clear written will or oral will. So it's not clear where his things are supposed to go. The third thing that you would notice if you were listening is that the estate is held between two brothers. But in the law of the time, in this Middle Eastern law, it is the eldest brother who controls the inheritance when the father passes. The eldest brother has to decide where and when it goes. So we know already, as an assumption of this story, that the one speaking to Jesus is clearly the younger brother. This is the one who does not have control, who wants control, and believes that what his brother holds in his hand is the key to his success. And it's also very apparent that the older brother does not want to work this out right now. We have no idea why. Jesus doesn't give us any indication why. We just know that he's not giving up his control over this inheritance. You and I both know this is a huge deal. How many of you have ever had to settle an estate? Raise your hand high. Not as many as I thought. I watched Brian Fury do this with his mother. It took 7 years to settle his mother's estate. Not fun. I remember my Uncle Zane, my dad's older brother, he just passed 6 months ago. Just a good farmer man. I mean, just a good dude. I love old Uncle Zane. He was about 85, I think, or 86 when he passed. About 10, 15 years ago, he took his two, like, 55-year-old sons. He invited them over. Their names are, this is how you know it's Iowa, Kent and Carol Dean. Those are both men, by the way. And my aunt's name was Aunt Alverna, Annie Al, so you know you're not in California then, with an Annie Al and Uncle Zane and a Carol Dean. So he invites Carol Dean and Kent over. He hands them each a Sharpie and a roll of masking tape. And he says, here's how this is going down. This is the Iowa way to do this. Go to the house together, put your name on anything you want, just stick it under the furniture, whatever you want, plates, I don't care, because I will not have you two men fighting when I die. Not a bad gig, huh? So you go through Uncle Zane's house, you look under the coffee table, there's Kent's name. I don't know, I didn't go in the fridge, I'm sure it said Carol Dean on the watermelon. I'm telling you, they never fought. I remember my dad, when his parents passed away, my dad went back to the farmhouse, which they still had, third-generation farmhouse. And he walked in the house, and his two sisters were squabbling over all the goods in the house. And my dad walked in, which, if you know my dad, this is very much my dad, and he saw my grandmother's Bible, and he said, does anybody want that? And I said, no. He grabbed it and started walking out the door. And they said, where are you going? He said, I got all I wanted already. I'm leaving. And literally went out the door, went to the airport, and flew home. The petitioner is crying out for justice in the settling of his father's estate. Even more than for us, land was everything to them. So his issue is a very real issue. Everyone has been in this position where we feel like we're getting a raw deal. Everybody has been in this position where we feel like we're not getting a fair shake. Every one of us has felt this need to have something that's being held back from us. And if I just had this one thing, I would be more relaxed. And to have this one thing, we feel like it is owed to you and I. The bottom line for this guy is his rights. What he esteems as owed to him is at the top of his list. More than that, he has an equation. His equation is, if I get what I want, I'll have life. If I just get the one thing that I'm fixated on, I'll be satisfied. It is into this equation that Jesus is going to speak this parable. And in the first century, rabbis, and David spoke about this last week, they were Torah experts. They were completely used to people coming to them for rulings over legal issues. In fact, it is even documented that there were rabbis who moved from Galilee in the north down to Jerusalem because they weren't getting enough legal rulings. So they would move to Jerusalem so that they could exercise their knowledge and their gifting more by doing these rulings. So it makes perfect sense that this young guy, who's not getting his fair share, would come to Jesus. It also even makes more sense that he would come to Jesus because Jesus is the peacemaker, right? He's the one that said in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers. Jesus is the one who reconciles people together. Jesus is the one who wants to bring a relationship back together. So of course he would come to him. And Jesus, like he so often does, answers the guy's question with yet another question. I think after about 3 years of this, I'd have gotten so frustrated. Jesus, just answer the stupid question. He never seems to do that. He just asks another, riddle me this, Batman kind of deal. And what he says to him is really quite harsh. Man, who made me judge or arbitrator over you? He doesn't even call him like friend or by name. It's just man. I mean, yeesh. This guy would be stood up on his heels at this point. Jesus' answer is, look, here's the deal. I will not play favorites. And I certainly will not help you further split a relationship when your equation is completely off. You have an equation that does not work, and I won't help you with it. And it is in this equation that Jesus then does what he so often does from chapter 9 to chapter 19 in Luke, this last 9 months of his life. He gives this man a parable. Some 20-something parables in this section of Luke. Let's read on. Then he said to them, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. This wording, beware and then be on your guard. The literal translation is stare at it until you understand it. There's your beware. And then be on guard so you can avoid greed. Wake up. Look at your life. Start getting more in touch with how much you're gripping and what you're seeking for, and then drive it out of yourself. Jesus responds with two very obvious warnings. First of all, this desire for things is insatiable, number one. And number two, the life you're looking for will never be found in those things. Again, the younger brother wants what's coming to him. The younger brother wants what is owed to him. He wants his rights. And if he only gets what he wants, he will be satisfied, he thinks. But back to our original thought. If God is the owner, and we are simply managing whatever it is he has placed in our hand for a period of time, how would that change this young guy's request or demand of Jesus? Let's look at the parable. Look at verse 16. And he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, what shall I do since I have no place to store my crops? Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. I love what Brian Fury told me about this. Brian's just a consummate entrepreneur. He said, there's even good business savvy in this. You never tear down what you already have just to pull the great Las Vegas thing and see if the next business deal is going to work. That's a side note. I thought that was fascinating. And there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, drink, and be merry. Some quick observations about this parable. First of all, it's very apparent in this parable that the man is already wealthy. He's already extremely rich. And by the way, he's not criticized either for how he got rich or that he is rich. Because in a weird side way, Jesus is making it clear, I have no trouble with you having money. And so in a weird way, Jesus is actually showing, because he's not criticizing this guy for how he got it. He's not criticizing him for having it. There's nothing wrong with any of those. What I do think is fascinating is the guy that's got the squabble with his brother is probably not wealthy. And he thinks if I just get what's owed me, then I'll be happy. If I could just get my house paid off, then my stress will go away. If I just get the one job I'm looking for, if I just have the one relationship, then I'll be satisfied. If I just have this one problem go away, then my life will work. It's fascinating. He's not wealthy. So what Jesus does is he says, your equation stinks. But here's what I'll do. I'll take your equation to the nth degree and talk about a super wealthy guy that got even more, in the words of Jim Abbott, super wealthy. And he still was not satisfied. The second observation in this parable is that I think it's clear what the parable is saying is this guy, this wealthy guy, has what is a bumper crop. It's an over-the-top kind of deal. He doesn't earn this bumper crop, by the way. In fact, he doesn't even need this bumper crop. His issue is what to do with it, and what he assumes now this bumper crop will provide him. But clearly God was the one that provided the wealth. That's why it's called a bumper crop. But there is zero indication in this passage that this guy has any sense that this is from God. And you can tell that by his wording. My barns, my goods, my soul. There's no level of understanding of where this came from. His issue is apparently simply how to preserve them for himself. It's interesting, in the New Testament, Paul really gives two clear reasons why we're supposed to work and why we're supposed to work hard as adults. One of them is in 2 Thessalonians. And Paul's reason in 2 Thessalonians is so that you're not a burden to other people. You don't suck the life out of other people by not working. That's not a good deal to Paul. That's not a good deal to God. You get up, you be diligent, you do your job, and then you're not pulling from other people. There's one reason. The second reason Paul gives is in Ephesians, so you can give to other people who are in need. This is really the only two reasons I can find in the New Testament to really take care of business and work hard. Don't be a burden to other people, and have money so you can help other people. Now again, there's nothing wrong with the money, and there's nothing wrong with having a surplus, because Jesus never points that out. It's his mindset that he's got. And I read in Kenneth Bailey, I love what he said, in a very real sense, he already has his barns. They're in the mouths of those that need help. Isn't that a fascinating comment? The third observation about this, which I think is a really chilling observation about this parable, is found in the word isolation. Look at verse 17. And he began reasoning to himself. In the Middle East, life is built around extremely tight community. The members of the community sit in the city gate, not for hours, they sit there for years deliberating life's issues. An issue like this that this younger brother brings to Jesus would be spoken about for hours in community to work this thing out. That's how the Middle Eastern person does it. They're not like us Californians. They don't drive to their neighbor's house like we do. They live with their neighbor. They're an extremely tight community. They do their thinking in a crowd of family and friends. They do their living in a crowd of family and friends. But clearly this guy has no one to talk with. It's fascinating to me. He trusts no one. He has nobody to exchange ideas with. He lives in complete and utter isolation. I think Jesus is giving us an amazing picture of what this kind of greed-seeking life, the kind of prison it leads to. The picture is unbelievably pathetic. He has arrived. He has gotten everything that anybody would ever want, quote unquote, in life. He is wealthy beyond wealthy. Everything he has longed for is now his. And who does he have to share it with? Friends? No. Family? No. You don't even read servants and servants' families in this passage. It's interesting, in the story of the parable of the prodigal son, as we generally refer to it, when the son returns, the father has this whole community to come celebrate with him because he's lived well. It's amazing when the shepherd or the woman that loses the coin, when he loses his sheep, this whole community comes out and parties with him. When the lady finds her coin, she says, I have to invite everybody over to celebrate finding this one coin. This guy has nobody because he has looked for life in all the wrong spots. The last observation in this is found in that word, life. The text says he speaks to his soul. In the Greek and in the Hebrew, it's the same idea. In the Hebrew, the word is nefesh. It means the whole person. The ability to think and feel and reason and respond. The whole person. In verse 16, listen to this little equation of his. And he told him a parable saying, the land of a rich man was very productive. So first of all, he's plentiful. He's got an abundance of things. Look, jump to verse 19. And I will say to my soul, my very person, soul, you have laid up goods for many years to come. Take your eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. His equation, his formula is very tight. I have a lot, therefore I have soulful enjoyment. If I get what I want, then I will have what I want. It is into this tiny little equation that the voice of God just thunders out of this passage. Look at verse 20. But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." In the New Testament, there are 4 different Greek words for fool. 2 of them are not that strong. The last 2 are very strong. This is the strongest of the strong. It literally means you're stupid. How's that for a really nice parable? Man, you are stupid. This man, this guy, who thinks that his many things, verse 16, will produce the good life, verse 19, is in reality Ephron. He's without mind, without spirit, and without thought. He's stupid. His formula for the good life, Jesus says, is sheer stupidity. And the verb Jesus uses, today, this very night, your soul is required of you, interestingly enough, is the Greek word for paying back a loan. Isn't that fascinating? Remember this idea of being a manager, of being a steward? He says you're stupid because your soul was not even yours, and you treated it like it was. What I think is really interesting, too, is Jesus, you notice in this, he doesn't ask this guy, how many people have you helped? He doesn't criticize this guy for, you really didn't help other people, which is really interesting. I would think at the end of this parable he would say, you're stupid because you treated your stuff that was God's and you should have helped other people. There is no criticism, by the way, in this parable directly about how he treated other people, which I think is really quite odd. I think what Jesus is saying to him, what you have done to yourself. He plans alone, he builds alone, he indulges alone, and now he will die alone. In a very real way, this guy has betrayed himself. He has betrayed his own person. Think of this. We studied this a lot when we did the Old Testament study. God should not be thought of as one. God is 3 persons in one. The Trinity is paramount to our faith. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit. The essence of who God is the relationship between them. Everything that comes from God is a result of the relational aspect between the Trinity. And when the 3 of them thought you and I up, they built us in the essence of that Trinity. Our core being is connection with God. Our very essence is our connection with the Trinity. We only draw life as a result of having that essence flow through God. Could you imagine looking somewhere else? You should all have your head down at this point, like I do. Every time you and I look somewhere else other than this, we are looking for life where life is not found. And our equation, hear this clearly, is stupid. Every time we think there is something in front of us that if I only had this, I would find life, Jesus says your equation is stupid. And we should hear those words strongly. Not for shame's sake, not for guilt's sake, but for a simple, large cup of coffee's sake. To wake up and smell the roses and realize where the essence of our soul lives. Amen? And what's fascinating is there's a litmus test. The thermometer to tell us where we're at is how tight we clutch what it is we see. You can feel your insides and they will give you away. When you are demanding, when you have anxiety, when you can see the whites of your knuckles gripping over what is owed to you, you are looking for life in the wrong place. And it is sheer stupidity, God says to Doug McBride. Our life flows out of the essence of the Trinity. And when you and I relate with each other out of love and relationship, really all we're doing is mirroring the essence of the life that exists between the Trinity. Does that make sense? What is the most chilling about this whole passage to me is that this guy is standing before Jesus demanding his rights because what is owed to him he thinks will produce life. And Jesus is marching to Jerusalem to give his life up for him and you. Is that just crazy? The man that Jesus is demanding resolution from is giving up every right he has for the sake of one human being. Because Jesus knows the essence of his life flows from his relationship with the Father and the Spirit. And he never seemed to forget that. I don't know how. I make it 12 minutes. I'm thrilled to death. Let's have the worship team come up. Do me a favor. Just close your eyes for a sec. If you focus better by looking at me, which I can't imagine, that's fine. I want to read to you the rest of the passage. Jesus is now turning to his disciples. Remember, I said there were so many people in the crowd that they were stepping on each other, but Jesus then turns his attention to this small group. And this young guy interrupts the conversation and says, "Oh, you got to do something for me. You got to fix this for me. I'm going to have life if I get this thing." Jesus tells this parable. At the end of the parable, he's done talking to this guy. He's too off. He looks back at his small group of disciples and he says, "Now, I'm going to tell you something. Let me whisper something to you." This is not to the fan, by the way. This is to the follower of Jesus. And he said to his disciples, "For this reason I say to you, do not worry about your life. Don't grip so tightly as to what you will eat, nor your body as to what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, who, by the way, the Torah describes as an impure animal. Consider this impure raven, for they neither sow nor reap. They have no storeroom, no barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more valuable are you than those birds? Of which of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his lifespan? And if then you cannot do a very little thing, why do you worry about other matters? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. But I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his glory clothed himself like one of those. But if God so clothes the grass in the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more will he clothe you, you men of little faith? And do not seek what you will eat and what you will drink. And do not keep worrying, for all these things the nations of the world, the fans, they eagerly seek. But your Father knows that you need these things. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has chosen gladly to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give to charity, make yourselves money belts which do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near, nor moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. gather myself. 3 weeks ago, I served your husband communion. I can feel, I gave him this embrace when I served him communion. I can still feel kind of the impression as we pulled our foreheads together. And I barely knew him. A dear brother who's with Christ right now. This is a fleeting life, you guys. When you leave this building, everything outside these doors will tell you that's not true. Every single thing almost that you come across when you leave these doors will tell you, you have time. It just lasts and lasts. And what Jesus calls us to in that parable is feel your soul for a moment, right? We're going to take communion this morning. And feel the freedom of knowing how frail we are, and how broken we are, and how messed up our faith is. We're not consistent people, and the last person shocked by that is him. He's not stunned by this at all. So why would we be? Right? Jesus went to the cross. He spilled his blood for you and I for all of eternity. And all the Father asks is one acknowledgement. One acknowledgement that it was a respectful, honorable act. And God the Father never gets over it. So, as you take the bread that represents the body of Jesus, broken for you and I, as you take the juice and dip the bread into the juice, which represents the blood of Christ spilt on our behalf, remember that. Remember that and feel what it is in life that you may be gripping that will never give you life. The life is found through the cross with God. Something Ray gets way more than you or I. Way more.